Hello, and welcome to another episode of Enchanting Economics in New Mexico. This podcast is a production of BBER, the recognized expert in socioeconomic data for the state of New Mexico. I'm your host, Rayanne McKernan, and with us, as always, is Suzan Reagan. Joining us today is our data bank manager, Suzan Reagan, and she's here to give us an update on the 2020 census. Thanks for joining us, Suzan.
Hi, Rayanne. It's my pleasure today.
So if anyone has been watching TV, listening to the radio, surfing the internet, they've had to have seen an advertisement for the 2020, encouraging them, pleading them to respond. Can you tell us how New Mexico's doing?
Oh, thanks for the question. You know, we all know it's important to be counted because the 2020 census for New Mexico will help determine the federal funding that we receive. And I think it's also important to note that it's really important for our voice in our voting and our representation. And that's why this 2020 census does that. So you want to know how we're doing. You know, COVID-19 has pushed a lot of things back. But the Census Bureau has published out on their website, off the 2020 website, so it's 2020census.gov. And when you go there, there's a response rate map that shows you how well different states, counties, cities, and census tracts are responding to the 2020 census. So when you go to the 2020census.gov, you'll do a mouse over of get the facts, and off the drop down, you'll select the response rates. They are, right now, the data that's published is for June 17th, and this is June 19th. So they're updating the response rates with a 2-day lag, and they're doing it daily. The U.S. self-response rate for June 17th is 61.5% for the United States, and of that, 49.1% was by internet. New Mexico's self-response rate just went over 50%. We're at 51.1%, and of that, 38.8% is by internet. I'm highlighting the internet because there's a couple of things going up. The internet response rate is the primary way the Census Bureau is encouraging us to respond, and this is the first time the Census Bureau has used the internet to fill out the census form. That's one criteria. The second thing that I want to make a point is that in New Mexico we have many rural areas that have little to no broadband, and even in some of the urban areas our internet can be slow. So even though the census form can be filled out on a browser or even on your cell phone, I'd also say that I think many people in New Mexico may find it sort of challenging or even scary to fill out their census form online. So us being 10% less, 11% less than what the U.S. response rate is not surprising. And I think it also shows up in the fact that the unemployment or the response by internet is also so low in New Mexico compared to the response rate that we're seeing for self-response rate by U.S. The only states behind us, now this is kind of the sad news, New Mexico is one of the lowest states. West Virginia is now at 53.1%. We were beating them, and in the last couple of weeks, they've outpaced us. The only other state that's less than New Mexico is Alaska at 47.1% response rate, and Puerto Rico, which is at 20%, but the census in Puerto Rico is done totally different, so it's not really kind of a good comparison. So unfortunately, we're way behind a lot of other states in our response rates.
Gotcha. And unfortunately, it's actually common, right? New Mexico traditionally has a history of white being completely counted, right?
True. We have a lot of populations that are hard to count, and traditionally we're very slow to fill out our surveys, so it's not unexpected.
Right. And what about bright spots? Are there any highlights on the New Mexico response rate?
Well, yeah, Los Alamos County is the 6th highest in response rates in the nation, with a response rate of 80.3% of their households have already responded today.
Wow.
Yeah, they're doing good. Bernalillo County is doing really well. it's got a 63.9% response rate for June 17th. And the city of Albuquerque, we're at 65%. Rio Rancho is beating the city of Albuquerque in our response rates. Rio Rancho is at 68.3, so Albuquerqueans, you need to get out there.
Yeah.
I used the response rate map this morning to look at all the stats I'm citing, but I also decided it would be kind of fun to look at my own census tract. And I live in the UNM neighborhood. And my census tract is the census tract 4.02 in Bernalillo County. And we're doing really good at 72.6%. And not surprisingly, our internet response rate is at 65.8%. But there's good internet in my area. There are many census tracts actually in the city of Albuquerque that are approaching 80% response rates right now. Way to go, Albuquerque. But as I said, I encourage everyone to check out the map and see how well your neighborhood is doing. And see if you can help boost response rates across the city. We want to beat Rio Rancho.
Oh, I love it. How about our tribal areas? You know, they've been hit so hard with coronavirus, and you know, I can't even imagine how they're even thinking about completing the census right now.
Oh yeah, anyone living in tribal areas can respond online. But the enumeration or the census taking done on tribal areas is done differently than a lot of other geographies. They are done by update leave, which I'll talk about later here. And they're also done by direct census takers enumerating them or walking through the pueblo and counting them on the ground. And so, not surprisingly, their response rates are going to really lag a lot of other areas in New Mexico, because the census really hasn't started to count them. So their response rates are low, especially low Navajo Nation. And we've seen the news with all of the coronavirus cases in the Navajo Nation, and they're totally shut down. Their response rate right now is at 1.6%. So you can see that it's not even occurring yet on the Navajo Nation. Highlight though, Cochiti Pueblo is at 39.8%. They're the tribal area with the highest response rate right now. And most of Cochiti Pueblo's response rate is actually through the internet. So I would say those tribal areas that actually have internet access and people are living on those tribal areas have already started to respond by internet. That kind of plays out through some of the other tribal areas. Sandia is at 27.4%. San Ildefonso, 27.8%. Nambe, 28.3%. I'm just going to kind of highlight a couple.
Yeah.
Hickory Apache, which is way up north in a very rural area, they're at 4.9%. Kind of closer here, Acoma Pueblo is at 9.9%. So you can hear the response rates on the tribal areas are much lower. And I think that's one of the things that also impacts how low the response rate is for New Mexico as a whole.
I saw the other day that I think it was on Facebook, an advertisement saying that the Census Bureau had changed their deadline. What does that mean? Because I honestly didn't know there was a deadline to respond.
Oh, so the whole operation of doing a decennial census has many different phases. And one of the phases we're in right now is called the self-response rate. And the self-responding is the cheapest way for the census to be carried out, because if people respond by themselves on the internet, it doesn't cost the Census Bureau all that much money. But if they have to pay somebody, an enumerator or a census taker, to come out to your house to count you, that costs them a lot more money. So the first part of doing the decennial census is to encourage self-response. And the old deadline, I believe, was in July. The new deadline has been pushed back into October 30th. So anybody who has not yet responded has plenty of time. So if you haven't responded and you're listening to this and it's before October 30th, go out and respond if you can to the census. But having said that, I'm talking about the self-response rate. There are a lot of individual programs that support the 2020 census count. For instance, there are the local field offices. throughout the United States. And in New Mexico, we have two. We have one in Las Cruces and one in Albuquerque. Due to COVID-19, those two offices were shut in March. The Las Cruces office was reopened at the end of May. And then earlier this month, the Albuquerque field office, was open. And the field offices, really, they support what are called the peak data collection operations. And those include programs of the update leave, the update enumerate, the non-response follow-up, the in-person group quarters enumeration, the service-based enumeration, the mobile questionnaire assistance program, the count of people experiencing homelessness outdoors, and the enumeration of transitory locations. So there's a lot of other operations that those field offices do to support the count.
Wow. And are all of these operations in effect in Albuquerque and Albuquerque and Las Cruces? Are they all important to be done, or are we just doing some of them?
So they're all important, but I kind of think I would highlight a couple that are really of interest. The update leave. An update leave operation is where an actual census taker actually drops the invitation to respond and a paper questionnaire on the front door. And across the United States, 5 million households are set to be enumerated that way. And the reason why they're done that is usually they're rural areas, or there are areas where the post office doesn't actually deliver the mail to the housing unit. The Census Bureau will only send a census to a housing unit. They won't send it to a post office box. So in New Mexico, 18% of our households don't have mail hand delivered to them. And we're very high compared to a lot of other states for the update leave program. So there are certain rural counties. Mora County is one that comes to mind, where none of the mail in Mora County is actually delivered to a mailbox, but is delivered to a post office box. So people go to the post office and pick up their mail. Those houses haven't received a form yet. Well, the update leave program just restarted for southern part of the state. It began again with the opening of the Las Cruces office in the middle of May, and all of the lower part of New Mexico has received their update leave forms now. And when the Albuquerque office opened earlier this month, they resumed those field operations of update leave to all the northern counties. And so we should start to see, as people actually receive their first contact from the census, their first invitation to participate in the census, we should actually start to see our numbers improve over the next month. So the update leave program is in its phases, and I understand that as of the end of this month, all households in New Mexico will actually have received their form through the update leave program that hadn't received one in the mail. The next phase that kind of hits for the field operations will be the non-response follow-up. And this is where a census taker will interview households in person. And the Census Bureau has really changed because of COVID-19. They've really changed all of the training that they've done for census takers, and how they're going to do those in-person interviews to take COVID-19 and what the CDC says that they should be doing to interact with other people. This was planned to do May 13th through July 31st, but now it's been revised. The schedule will be August 11th through October 31st. So that part of non-response follow-up actually will start in August. Mobile questionnaire assistance is another kind of important program that the Census Bureau does, and that's where they have a mobile unit that goes out, and it's got computers and stuff, and it will help people at places where people gather and stuff, like events and grocery stores, to fill out online the census form. That, of course, has been revised, and it's constantly being revised, so they don't know if they're actually going to do that program, but we're hopeful that we'll see something maybe in August if COVID numbers are good. So right now we're kind of in an indefinite period on that particular program. Then something that's really important, I think, for all of our nonprofits and the people who work with people who are experiencing homelessness and providing services to them, the count of people experiencing homelessness and who are living outdoors and stuff, typically that program was done in parks, and it was in all-night businesses, and they also did something, an enumeration of transitory locations, and that was planned in April 9th through May 4th. Both of those programs have been put off, and those particular counts won't be done until September 22nd, September 3rd, and through the 28th. So those two programs coming up that really take account of how many people are experiencing homelessness, and it really is kind of an important number for our nonprofits and those people who provide services to them to know, has been put off till September.
Okay, so I'm just curious, when will we actually be able to see the results or the data from the 2020 census?
That's a good question. By the U.S. Constitution, the Census Bureau is supposed to deliver the apportionment counts to the presidents by December 31st of the year that the census is planned. But, obviously putting off all of these programs and stuff has delayed a lot of things. And so there is currently a bill in Congress. The Census Bureau has gone to Congress and asked them to adjust the date of delivery for that apportionment count to April 30th, 2021. And that's typically our first look at the data, but that's just the high-level raw counts. The president then delivers the apportionment counts to Congress within 7 days of the start of the legislation session, or approximately 10 to 20 days after. They traditionally would receive it December 31st, and then 10 to 20 days after that, then the Congress would receive it. So now they're looking to ask it to be 7 days after April 30th. And then finally, the high level, the delivering of redistricting counts to states. By law, the Census Bureau will deliver those counts to each state that needs to complete legislative redistricting. And they're asking to move, but by April 1st, it would be April 1st, 2021 next year, but they've requested to push that off to July 1st, 2021. And then a lot of the tabulated data that comes off of those products does a rolling release within a month or so. So we're looking that we might not actually see our data until July 31st, 2021, but that is all based on what Congress passes.
Do you have any prediction on how they will decide?
Well, everybody you talk to has been kind of cagey on it, but I'm pretty sure, given the situation that we're in and the fact that the Census Bureau had to suspend operations due to COVID-19, I'm pretty sure that they're actually going to pass it. We'll see if they pass it as the Census Bureau requested, or if they make changes to the dates. We certainly are keeping an eye on it.
Yeah, and it'd be nice too. I mean, I get, I'm curious. I'd like to see what the results are, but at the same time, in our line of work, we often use economic census data, and I think is the most recent data out for 2017 or 2018, something like that. So clearly, the turnaround time there isn't within a year. So hopefully there'd be some leniency and some understanding like there is with this data, right?
Yeah, I think so. And you bring up a good question. Just this month, the economic census data for New Mexico was released. And so you can now go out and get by sectors data for New Mexico from the economic census. And for people who aren't familiar with census does the decennial census. That's what they're required to by law, by the U.S. Constitution. But they do hundreds of other surveys, and one of the other things that they do is an economic census in the years ending in 2 and 7. And so the 2017 economic census data is coming out on a rollout basis. And unfortunately, New Mexico starts with N, so it seems like it's been a long time for New Mexico data to come out, but it was released earlier this year, or earlier this month. And, in highlight of that, we'd had a lot of talk that I'd like people to, know more about the economic census data and how to utilize that, and how valuable that data set can be for businesses who are doing business planning, to put it in their business plan. So we're setting up an economic webinar with Andy Haight of the U.S. Census Bureau for July 22nd at 1 o'clock. And if anybody's interested, they can email me and I'll show them how to register for that.
Nice. Is there a cost with that?
Oh no, we're doing this for free, although it is first come, first serve at this point. We're limited to 100 people, but the last webinar we did, I think I only had about 50 or 60, so I think there's plenty of space.
Wow. Well, that's nice. Sarun, do you have anything you want to add?
No, you guys went over pretty much everything.
I think there's so much that the U.S. Census Bureau does. We could probably talk for hours.
I could talk for hours on it.
Yeah, but we can always save that for another episode too.
That sounds like a good idea.
All right, cool. Well, then I think that about wraps it up for Enchanting Economics in New Mexico. Don't forget to check us out at BBER, that's BBER.unm.edu, or on social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn under @UNMBeaver. Thanks for listening, everyone. And please